Welcome, everyone. I think we started with our webcams on. You can see 4 of the 5 of us who will be talking to start us off. And we'll run through some slides here and get into earth care and Christian education. So this is one of the major ways earth care congregations and other community organizations are really getting into sharing earth care with children, youth, young adults, and adults intergenerationally as well. This webinar is part of the Presbyterian Hunger Program series on webinars, and I really encourage you to look out. There's some other great ones coming. I'm with the Environmental Ministries program, and we have, as you'll see, resources and webinars. We have a Lent and Advent calendar, Earth Day Sunday material, so there's lots of educational options through our website and anytime folks want to contact me. But one of my favorite things to do is to find out what folks are doing across the country. And this is an opportunity for me to share with you some of the most dynamic folks working out there, as well as to invite your questions, answers, and sharing some of your own stories from the participants. So as we brainstormed what might be helpful in this webinar, we wanted to touch a little bit about how have churches engaged this issue, just in general, connecting Christian discipleship and faithfulness with earth care. We know some models are more successful than others, and it really depends on your context. What challenges have folks surmounted as they've tried things or had to tweak things, and what resources can be used and replicated. While some things might not work in every setting, some things might. So today, I am really delighted to introduce to you the first 3 you'll see on the screen. Daisy is online, and she's a preschool teacher and mother and a member of the Christian Education Committee, and you will hear in a moment a couple of the wonderful things they're doing with children at Hunter Presbyterian. Erin Pratt is also with us, and she's the program director at Minnesota IPL and also works with the youth at St. Luke's, and they are doing some really incredible youth programming and leadership there. Vicki, who will then speak, is doing the Young Adult Eco Stewards program. She's done it as a participant and has done huge leadership around one coming up next week in Gainesville. So we welcome Vicki. And Bill, who you cannot see online, is an environmental scientist and educator, as well as a member and leader of the Earth Care team at Montreat Presbyterian. And they've done really creative, great programming with adult programs. So at this point, I would like to turn it over, and we can focus on Hunter Presbyterian Church with Daisy.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about what we've been doing at our church. We have Hunter is a relatively small to mid-sized church, and we have mostly older elementary aged children there. We do have a few youth, a few preschoolers. We do not have the baby boomer age group, and then we do have several elderly. So we have an interesting demographic mix. Historically, that's how it's happened. So one of the things that we did was we really struggled with how to connect with the children that we were working with. And one of the things that we started by doing is we started by listening to what the children had to say and what they were interested in. And what we discovered was that they had a lot of their own passions, that we didn't really need to talk to them about the various missions that were going on in the Presbyterian Church so much as we needed to listen to what they were interested in and sort of get how they were taught to repeat back to us as important. They had their own sense of what brought them joy, and they had their own sense of how they were going to live their lives. So we did a lot of just fellowship and listening, which can be hard to do. We also had to get to the mindset where we respected their level of discipleship. And here is my daughter reading to her dog. That is really important to her discipleship. And one of the things that we discovered that we were doing as CE members is we often overlooked what children wanted to do, or we were quick to revise their ideas to make them more applicable to what we thought was practical and made more sense. Instead, what we did was we sort of affirmed what they were called to do and remembered that they share in our lives just as much as we do in theirs. A lot of the times, young children learn about God and learn about the Bible through Sunday school, and then they learn about how to sit still and worship. There's very precious little time in there where they are actually set out to directly experience their own spiritual lives. We spend a lot of time talking to them about God. One of the things that we tried to do as a CE committee was to allow them to experience God on their own. What we discovered was that children these days are much more disconnected from nature than perhaps we were or any of the older generations. And there was a sense of awe and spirituality that they gained simply by going outside. From there, we helped the children explore with us. Instead of taking a program or finding a curriculum that we really liked and sort of imposing it on them, we talked about what we heard them say. And the direction that our children tended to go in was outside. They spend so little time outside with their school days and even their activities. Even if soccer is outside, it's much more programmed than the free time that they might naturally want to have. And so we talked to them about how we heard their spiritual lives going, and we showed them the resources online that might bolster their interests. We were surprised to discover one year that they did not choose the more interesting and fantastic VBS curriculums like superheroes or things that involve just a lot of stuff and flash. They actually chose to look carefully at the VBS Living Waters curriculum through the PCUSA. And from there, we tied them into understanding their own stewardship as earth care providers. We were very honest as adults on the CE committee. Environmentalism was not necessarily our thing. We have a group of teachers. We have a couple of grandmothers. One of us had a garden, but not all of us did. So we chose to explore that together and just be honest with the children. Look, we're going to try this for the first time. Look, we've never grown and tasted arugula. This is the first time we've heard about a rain barrel. We were just super honest, and the children appreciated sharing that path with us, and were generous about it. We also showed them, since they were so empowered by choosing their curriculum and their direction for their discipleship, how they can really be real leaders. Children are very sensitive, the ones in our church anyway, we're very sensitive to being sort of the cute mascots that get trotted up there for children's sermons. And I have to admit that I find that very cute too. But we also wanted them to feel like they were real participators. So while they can't at this point serve on sessions, they can serve on committees. They can make presentations to session. They can form their own committees. They can participate in mission outreach. They can do all that stuff. They just needed us to show them how to do it, when session meets, how to get on the docket, what presbytery is. So once they learned what they wanted to do, this sort of sometimes boring polity stuff came a little bit more naturally and more readily, because They knew they wanted to know it in order to accomplish their goals. We also decided that this was obviously a really great way to engage generations that were naturally rather far apart. If you're talking about 80-plus-year-old members and children who are 8, there's going to be a vast difference, and these two individuals may not naturally sit down at coffee hour and start a conversation. But they were able to engage the WCE members. They engaged us intensely. We let them know that. And so we gave them the options that they might not have thought of on their own. Would you like to invite yourselves to an adult CE class? Would you like to come to this meeting? Here are some meetings here. This is what we could do there. This is what you might want to do. Do you have ideas? We also invited the children to preach. We taught them how to preach. We taught them how to write liturgy. And that connected them much more deeply with worship than learning how to sit and just receive worship passively. We also had to continue talking to our congregation almost constantly because church was going to change from the very traditional middle-high church to something where a child may, in the middle of the pastor's sermon, raise his hand and ask a question, or may stand up and say something, volunteer something that was important to her. And when the children preached, they tended to use posters and signs and a little bit of drama, a little bit of art. And sometimes it took them a while to find the page that they were on before they read. But they did practice, and their earnestness important and obvious. And I think it has made us a better community. These are some of our children, most of our children. And one of the things that we really had to let go of as a CE committee is a lot of times when we start a project, we think, how can we make this grow our church? How can we evangelize this? How can we include the larger community? We had to focus first on the children ahead of us and celebrate what they were doing and remind them that what they were doing was monumental, and to really feel and be present for that idea. So yeah, we had this teeny tiny little VBS, and they made this teeny tiny garden that you can see, and it was purely amazing. So from this moment, they took this and they went ahead and formed an Earth Care team. Excuse me, they formed an Earth Care team at our church. They explored the PCUSA website, discovered the Earth Care certification form, looked on the map, discovered that there was, at the time, not a church in Lexington, Kentucky, where we're located, that had the Earth Care certification. They filled out the form. They got us certified. They worked hard on it. And I think the most important thing for us that has come out of it is that they are starting to own their own discipleship. They are starting to also feel deeply connected with the outside, with nature, and with environmentalism in a way that is frankly difficult to do when you sit in a classroom 9 months out of the year. So we're incredibly excited with what we've done here at Hunter, and just hope that we can share our excitement and our joy and with others. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Daisy. Just to share 2 children curriculum ideas, and we will be including some of these resources and others on a website, which we'll put up at the end, and we'll put Daisy's presentation as well as the others on there. And again, time for some questions and answers at the end of our webinar here. But just two for you to track. There's a curriculum for children that links older elementary children with some children in Peru that have developed their own organization around health in the environment. There's also a middle school curriculum around just eating, and it's a really fabulous resource that looks at all aspects of eating: health, environment, justice, field workers, and so forth. And then the Living Waters for the World VBS materials, Daisy mentioned briefly. There are also some from Solar Under the Sun. And then there's some curriculum available through eco-justice.org, an organization out in Colorado. And so you can look through a whole host of resources and curriculum and how they compare to each other, not just for children, but it includes children curriculum. And the last one I found is from someone I know from the Brethren community who started this nonprofit, newcommunityproject.org, and they had an Operation Creation. I think it's like a 5-session curriculum. So those are just a few of the things that I wanted to add on to the things that Daisy had experientially, and we will show a website at the end that folks can go to look for more resources, and folks are welcome to send me other excellent things they've come across, and we'll continue to share those around after the webinar. So at this point, we wanted to then go to St. Luke Presbyterian Church, working with children of the older age group and their youth and youth leadership.
Hi everybody, my name is Erin Pratt and I am at St. Luke Presbyterian Church just outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And Daisy, thank you so much for sharing your work. I'm just really moved by what you've been doing and really resonate with your approach, and can't wait to share it with people here. So I'd like to share with you today really what we've been doing with the youth at our church, but to do that, it's first important to tell the story of the context, what's come before. At St. Luke, for the last 5 years, we've had a 2-week creative arts and nature camp. And each year, we focus on a different aspect of nature. One time it was water, another time it was the animals that come out in the night. Last year it was about the wolves. And in each case, we're looking to learn from nature about ourselves, about our place in the world, about relationships, the way they're modeled by that aspect of nature. And so it involves doing papier-mâché puppets that help us kind of empathetically and theatrically get into the paws or hooves of another species. And we have music where we do orff instruments, which are really fun to do with kids because you can take the keys off so nobody can play out of tune, and explore music around those themes. And then we have nature class, which is what's happening in this picture, where we do a lot of sensory-based play and exploration. And we sit in circles a lot. And the 3 rules of the camp are be kind, be kind, be kind. And so we talk about kindness, and when conflicts arise, we work that out and practice listening from the heart. And our youth are central to that. You can see in this picture several of the high school aged youth counselors. And just as much as our hope in this is to connect children developmentally to nature as a way of helping them develop spiritually and moving them forward into really being earth stewards, we're equally focused on the development of the youth. So part of how we do that is we have a 2-day youth leadership retreat where we focus on them building relationships with each other, building leadership and facilitation and conflict resolution skills, and learning about the curriculum that will be focused on that year so that they can really take the lead in it. And this is really modeled after the principles of healthy youth development. Search Institute here in Minneapolis has spent a decade studying, what is it that supports children in growing into thriving young adults. And that at the root of that, it is supporting them in what comes from within, the gifts and skills and passions that they have, and seeing those, and then giving them an opportunity to use them. And so that's really what we've been doing at St. Luke for the last many years. We really believe that, as opposed to, as Daisy was saying, a view that can see children and others as empty vessels waiting to receive information, that each child, each youth has vital information and gifts for the whole, and that those things are developed most through experience. And that's how we learn about the gospel, is through experiencing kindness and experiencing giving kindness to others. So this picture takes place at the end of camp, where we circle up all 55 campers and all the youth leaders, and then one by one we bring the youth leader into the center to give thanks to them and to reflect specifically on the unique gifts that they brought. So within that context, that we began to ask the question at St. Luke, as a community, intergenerationally, how is it that we can move forward in a deeper way, engaging on earth care issues, and particularly around climate change? I began working at Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light, which is a state chapter of a national nonprofit that's focused on just this effort. And I thought, before I go off and try and help other faith communities mobilize around this, I might want to see what could happen at my church. So we prayed about it, and a team of us got together, and just as Spirit works in amazing ways, one of the youth, Cody, the one on the far left, at that time said, I have watched this movie about climate change, and it's really impacted me, and I want to show it to the youth group. Can I? We said, absolutely. So we did, and it was really overwhelming and upsetting, as it should be, to the kids. And they were talking about it, and Joy said, it feels like we're supposed to do something about it. And so we offered them the opportunity to lead worship, from the liturgy to children's time to the sermon for Children's Sabbath. So this happened in the fall. And they said, yes, and they, in their busy schedules, got together twice a week for over a month to shape this. And the children's time, again, was geared to where is it developmentally appropriate to engage children on these issues. And one of those is just where their passions are, which is around wonder and nature. And so for children's time, we brought in chickens and bunnies and a husky that looks like a wolf, and the kids got to engage. And then in the sermon, the 4 of them did the sermon, and they really did a lot of personal testimony about what their stake in this is, what they want for the future, their love of children, their connection to nature, and the facts about climate change. And they had a very specific call to action that they offered the community. The name of the sermon was "Come Walk With Us." So they weren't saying we ourselves are going to be the only doers of responding to this, but as our mentors and as our aunts and uncles and parents and grandparents, we want you to care for us by caring for God's creation. And so they invited people to attend one of 4 different small group discussions where they showed the movie Do the Math. which was put out by the organization 350.org. It's 40 minutes long, and it, in succinct ways, lays out, the problem of climate change, the problem of fossil fuel, and the time frame of what we need to do to be able to protect our future. And they ask people to share about their feelings and to talk with each other, and to consider what are the gifts and resources that we have within our community as a way of informing our response. And so people came. Our church has about 340 members. On any given Sunday, there's 120 to 180 people in service, and 120 people in total came to one of these conversations because they were hungry to hear from the youth. They wanted to support them. And so people who didn't really know much about the issue were willing to come and engage in this in ways they never had before. The youth kept listening, and we had potlucks, which you can see here, and Chris is presenting on some possible solutions based on what had emerged from the conversations, and we prayed and really made some concrete steps, next steps. And so we shaped these next steps around this idea of a three-legged stool, which we've been working a lot with at Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light, which is this understanding that really to be stewards of the earth at this moment in history, we can be most effective when we take this three-legged approach. So the practical has to do with those really important solutions that reduce our carbon footprint. And St. Luke moved forward with that and took advantage of some new legislation around solar, and we're going to be getting solar panels on our church roof by the end of the summer. And we did an energy audit and got blinds and have timed our air conditioning and heat to conserve as much energy as possible. And so we've really been working on that. And then, jumping down to the bottom, the spiritual leg of the stool is the acknowledgement that the problems that we're having environmentally, the crisis that we're facing with the climate, is symptomatic, not just of habits and practices, but from a disconnection to nature, a disconnection with our own hearts, with each other, and with spirit. And so that we can't be successful in really caring for the earth and responding to climate change unless we, in everything we do, attend to this new story, this way of understanding that we're in fact deeply connected, and how we relate to each other matters. And so notice our whole story from the camp up till now has been around fostering those relationships. And then systemically, there has been some powerful ways to respond. We understand that as kind of a movement building leg of the stool, that it's so important what we're doing in our individual communities, but opportunities like this one with this webinar to link together those individual actions to tell a larger narrative that can really impact our culture and our larger society is really important. So one of those things was responding to the tar sands, the Keystone XL pipeline. In Minnesota, we have a lot of tar sands pipelines, and there's a lot of leaks, and we have close ties with indigenous nations who are being deeply impacted by these practices. And so that is something that people feel passionate about. So as a part of raising that issue, the youth and children did a skit for the Children's Time that you can see here, and invited people to attend to a training in which we would learn how to appear before the authorities if this was to be approved, how to be active in a nonviolent civil disobedience act. And 60 people came and spent their Saturday learning that, and you can see that the youth were there and the elders were there, so it's been really an opportunity to connect in an intergenerational way. And out of that, people have started going to vigils, and this is a vigil near the church, but also had a lot of other people who don't attend the church. So it's another way that we begin to kind of expand out of the community. And then another systemic opportunity that we had was around fossil fuel divestment, which we're really excited about in the presbytery now. So our youth put forward a overture calling for the Presbytery to divest from fossil fuels, and our session approved it. And then the Bills and Overtures Committee for the Twin Cities Area Presbytery approved it, and so it came forward to the Presbytery meeting, and the youth got up there and spoke passionately about how they see, that Jesus calls them to powerfully in speaking for the voiceless, and that's one of the ways we could do that. And it passed unanimously. They got national attention with the support of Karen Larson and other adult leaders. And 12 presbyteries have now passed this resolution, and it's going to the General Assembly this summer for a vote. So I hope you pay attention to that and find ways to help support that passage. This is a growing movement. Over 300 universities around the country have divestment campaigns going on. But it all really comes back to this place, this place of connecting with the natural world around us and with each other and with play and with our senses. And so here's some of the resources that we've used to develop our youth programming and to develop the camp. Nature and the Human Soul by Bill Plotkin really weaves together psychologists and eco-psychologists and from many decades and poets and theologians into understanding an eco-centric form of development as opposed to an egocentric, and looks at what are the qualities of wholeness that want to be naturally begin to emerge, and how is it that we can support that. And then David Sobel's work, Wild Play and Place-Based Education, as well as the Coyote's Guide to Connecting with Nature. It's just chock full of just amazing ways to engage with their senses and with the natural world. And then Sparks, our church has studied this. It's focused on what I talked about earlier about how to really listen for the hidden sparks, the intrinsic passion of our youth, and how to form a team around them, and how churches can really be a big part of that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Erin. We are going to move straight on to Vicki, who's going to talk about eco-stewards. And so just a reminder, we're going to hear about young adults from Vicki, and then adult education from William Seaman and Montreat after that, and hope to still have a few minutes at the end for questions. So thanks, Vicki. I see your slides are up.
Thank you. So my name is Vicki Machado. I am a leader and organizer for the Eco Stewards program. And Eco Stewards is a community of young adults ages 20 to 30 who want to explore their faith and the call to environmental stewardship. So we do this through, let's see, Okay, so we do this through our various principles that we're kind of rooted in, and we root all of our primary principles in Jesus' call to love our neighbors. So eco-consciousness, being in solidarity with the poor, living ecologically and socially responsible consumers, and nurturing, supporting personal, spiritual, and vocational journeys. We have roots within the Presbyterian Church, and we try to provide education and training while creating a community of young adults. So we physically carry out these principles through our place-based week-long trips that allow young adults to, it allows young adults the opportunity to discover how others are placing their beliefs into action. So each year we visit a different region or bioregion or watershed, have you, to learn the issues of the land and those who live there. In 2011, we went out to Montana, and each location is connected with a theme or a story. So we talked about sustainability and healthcare through reconciliation. And the people who we were talking with mainly were people on the Crow Reservation. We discussed coal exports. We had reflection time for a prairie walk. We helped build an earth ship. So each week has different components that kind of pop up in different ways. So we'll usually have some kind of reflection, we'll have this storytelling, we'll have some kind of hands-on, perhaps skill learning or sharing involved. The next year we went to Boston and Vermont, and we talked about climate change and Christian activism. So this time we were able to talk with people from Occupy Boston. We spent a lot of time in Vermont. As some of you know, they have a really powerful local food movement there. So we got a chance to talk with people on the ground and hear what they were doing and how they were placing their beliefs into action. We talked about the area, the region of Lake Champlain. We hiked and biked it, kind of seeing on the ground what's going on, and then connecting that to our own stories. And that's something that is a theme. We just continuously have this connection to, as a 20 to 30-year-old, how does this affect me, and how can I take this back to my own community? So we have these things called eco-journeys, where throughout the week we will share our own story. And it kind of goes in the setup of, where do I come from, where am I now, and where am I going? And this has, it's deeply rooted within environmental thought and how our faith connects with it, because a lot of these kids are usually in college studying environmental or religious education, or are just passionate about these issues. So then this past year we went to Portland, Oregon, and we again our theme this time was connectional and urban living as a creative response. So here we were able to talk with people about gentrification. Again, we talked about coal exports. We talked about sustainability initiatives. We biked around Portland, helped pull invasive ivy toward Zanger Farm, which is this farm that allows local residents to use EBT or food stamps for the CSA share. We went to a repurpose project, and we explored co-housing, as well as talking with a church that's serving exclusively the homeless. And I feel as though, having engaged the eco-stewards now as both a participant and a leader, and now an organizer, and as a young adult myself, I feel like this really is a great way to connect with others, especially in this age range. Connecting with others who are interested in these issues and who want to connect their faith to to the environment around them. They want to engage socially and environmentally. And then our next trip, which is taking place next week, is to Gainesville, Florida, and we will be talking about food and faith uniting together in a southern food shed. And I'm especially excited about this because I spent the last 6 years in Gainesville getting my undergrad and master's, and I was able to really learn what's going on there and connect with the people and see people living out their beliefs through the work that they do. So a couple of things that we have planned are listed here. So, again, we're going to be touring various farms. We're going to be talking with the Coalition of Immokalee Workers. We're going to be visiting a kitchen incubator, sharing a meal with the Gainesville Catholic Worker, visiting a local community farm that provides all their produce to homeless shelters, talking about water issues, and the list kind of just keeps going on from there. But it's something that we're really excited about, and I'm happy to be involved. So from here, I'm just going to turn it over to Bill Seaman with the Montreat Presbyterian Church. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vicki. And I've unmuted myself. I hope you hear me well, and I'm going to full screen. My topic this morning is environmental and biblical literacy in adult education.
Bill, if I could jump in for a second, we can hear you, but we can't see your screen yet. Did you click on the Show My Screen button? There we go. Thank you.
You have it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just very, very quickly about Earth Care at Montreat Presbyterian Church, which is in the mountains of western North Carolina. We've had an Earth Ministry team only since 2010, so it's a fairly young program. Our aims are basically two: bringing glory to God and enhancing worship in all of creation. And then practically, how do we reduce our ecological footprint as a congregation? This is our three-legged stool. Our themes are inspiration, education, and participation. And we became an Earth Care congregation in 2011. So let me tell you what I'd like to do this afternoon in about 6 or 7 minutes. I want to introduce environment into adult Christian education, and it's really important that you consider both formal, what's in the classroom, and non-formal, such as at a potluck supper, where you have a teachable moment. My aims are twofold: using our Montreat Presbyterian CE program as a case study, and then hopefully we've got time to share ideas, two-way exchange. I have 4 topics today. I'd like to talk about the hurdles that we had to overcome in starting our adult CE environmental education program, give you a quick profile of the congregation, sort of our needs assessment, tell you how we've worked, and then finally give you some evaluation of what we think was successful and where the challenges remain. So hurdles in getting started, we had 3. We started from scratch in introducing Earth as a new subject matter in a very established Christian education program, just new grounds to plow, so to speak. And because of that, we had unknown interests and pitfalls. We weren't sure how the Christian Education Committee would receive us, how would they put Earth as a priority, where were the pitfalls along the way. And then finally, as you may gather from the profile of our congregation, I'll give you, we were concerned about a poor start. If we didn't do well the first time, would we get a second chance? And we did, of course. Our congregation is older, a lot of retired folks, pretty well educated, and they remain active in the community, such as in this picture of a workday cleaning of a park. We have only about 80 members, but we've got a lot of other supporters, including a number of retired clergy. So in our congregation, we have a wealth of people with experience in Christian ministry, Christian education, and missions. Bible is always at the core of Christian education. So with this learned crowd, we figured it might be a tough crowd to please in terms of measuring up to standards. So here's what we did. And early in our efforts, we sowed seeds in terms of building strong relationships with the session, with the committees, with the leaders, and getting folks on board with the whole environmental program, not just Christian education. And we found that as we worked in areas of outreach or mission or even something as practical as recycling, our Earth Ministry team built credibility, and that helped in our discussions with Christian education. We also asked the committee what their priorities were, We prayed a lot. That was our inspiration. And if we did anything right, we found a teacher with gravitas. In all these retired ministers in Montreat, we found a person who sort of came with a good reputation and opened a lot of doors for us. In terms of external guidance, the Presbyterian Church's Earth Care guidelines are just invaluable in terms of developing the program. But the other thing we did is in the secular world, the North American Association for Environmental Education is a goldmine of materials on planning environmental education programs, needs assessment all the way to evaluation and delivery to different age groups. I'm going to connect a few of the arrows and dots now. A couple of years ago, our very first Christian education class was on a Wednesday afternoon. That's when we have our Sunday school. Cam Murkison, pictured at right, was our man with gravitas. He's a retired dean and professor from Columbia Seminary, and his 4 Wednesdays program was Creation as the Theater of God's Glory. Brought in multimedia, brought in scripture, and was very engaged, and in fact it was the highest attended class that we've had in the church's history. He repeated that, worrying about what we eat, drink, and wear. And then one of our resident photographers showed her photos of seeing God through photography. And then a local professor from Warren Wilson College took us on one of her faith journeys. And then also she's working with us to develop a climate and faith class this coming fall. So that's formal education. But in some ways I think we've been even more successful with informal education. No member left inside is our aim, getting people out for teachable moments. One of our teachers is our recycling fairy, or the trash fairy, and she performed at a potluck supper and did a wonderful hands-on workshop about the do's and don'ts of recycling. We've instituted a series of challenges to the congregation. At Christmas it was fair trade and alternative giving. You know, what do you give to the person who has everything? And then finally, just a month ago, we visited nearby in Asheville, North Carolina, the National Climatic Data Center, and we had 25% of our church members to go for the middle of the day, basically, and touring the climate center and also hearing from a scientist on climate issues, and came back really energized and excited. So what worked and what didn't work? The successes that I think we've enjoyed, we had the session and pastor on board. The credibility from other areas, as I've mentioned, really sort of got us up to a good start with Christian education. Having the Earth Stewardship theologian who volunteers his time has really been sort of a source of pride to a lot of members. They can say, we have this person, and it's really been a model for, and we outreach to other churches. Starting with the Bible was critical in reaching our audience, getting the best talent, as I've mentioned also, and then networking, tying to the Environmental Education Foundations and best practices of other organizations. We are testing the waters with third rail topics, and it's gone pretty well to take risks. And by a third rail topic, I mean climate change, because we just didn't know how folks would respond. Work remaining, 4 things in closing. We still haven't changed the culture of our congregation. People adopting personal practices, we've got a long way to go. We'd like more leaders to emerge and participate in our team. We see now there's a need to green the presbytery after we've been to some of their meetings and seen some of their practices. Finally, outreach. It's sort of occurring to us that as we develop Earth Care programs and have Earth Care education, it's a way to reach out to the community through newspaper stories about the events and see who might be attracted to this kind of a congregation. So thank you very much. I'll escape from the slides and go back to Rebecca.
Thank you, Bill. You all have now seen, those of you participating, why I've been so delighted with this chance to share with you the folks online. This has been really fun to see, from the mud on youth faces to the dressed up recycling fairy. So some really great creative programs. I know we only have a few minutes, but we did want to leave some time for questions and answers. Jessica is going to moderate those. So as she said at the beginning, there's a question box on your GoToWebinar control panel. You can type some questions into there, and we'll open the floor. We'll do that for a few minutes, and then we will close our time together and share with you where we can follow up for more conversation and more connections afterwards. Jessica, do we have any questions there?
Not yet, but if you can give folks just a few seconds, it might be that some folks are typing.
Sure.
Joy would like to know if all of the slides and presentations will be available online.
Yes, we have gotten permission to share the presentations and PowerPoints, as well as a recording of this webinar. You won't see the opening webcam pictures. Those aren't recorded, but all the rest will be. And there's a new website we'll put up at the end that will have even additional mission trip options, adult education curriculum resources that will link through to other things as well.
Stephen has a question, and he's asking, how can the Earth Care program apply to a camp setting? I believe is his question.
Yeah, I'll take that one again. This is Rebecca. We do actually have a green leaf seal program where camps check off a number of things they're doing, and they're listed on a website, and get a certificate like this one that you see in the questions and answers time, but it's a green leaf seal for a camp rather than an Earth Care congregation. I think if a camp really wanted to go more in depth than what the certificate or seal is, that would be something we could talk offline about how to adapt. So I'll flash my email up at the end, and we can certainly talk more about that.
It looks like we have another question for Daisy. It's from Cindy in New Jersey. She's wondering how your congregation responded to all the changes as they were really big. What obstacles did you face, and how did you and the children meet them?
They were received actually pretty well. One of the main obstacle that we had to face is that the children were not going to do what other people's idea of their discipleship was. So sometimes we would have older members say, you know, I can no longer take care of the garden in the church. Do you think your kids could do that? And I would have to say, I can ask the children. I can't answer that, and they need to be able to make their own decision about that, because ultimately they are their own people and they are their own disciples. So it was just a lot of repeating in that way. I actually found that the older adults found the children preaching and doing worship to be quite moving, because our children tended to be unafraid of sharing personal stories. One kid got up and talked about how his parents were getting a divorce, and that in that space of pain, he was really discovering a way to connect spiritually with the earth, and then through God, with God. So I think there were very few obstacles. Most of it was just getting the children to be viewed as people, as persons, and also for the children, getting them to understand that adults were not adversaries. Does that answer the question? I hope.
Thank you for that. Yes, Cindy says, yes, thank you very much. And Rebecca, it looks like that is all the questions that we have for right now.
Okay, great. We'll go on here then to say we are going to put things up on the website. You'll see here. It's kind of a long link, so we'll send an email out for folks who put down their email as an option when they registered for the webinar. But this is the website. You can do pcusa.org/environment if you want, just as a shortcut, and then do /education. And that is going to list a number of the resources I compiled, and it will be where this webinar will be uploaded, as well as the individual prezis and PowerPoints. My email is there, rebeccabarnes@pcusa.org, and look forward to continued conversations on this. I want to invite, I know there are wonderful other programs out there and educational things happening. So if there are stories in your own congregation or community that you'd like to share, we do share pretty actively on the EcoJourney blog that has lots of stories across the board about things like this. And if you have something to share, I would love to put it there. And I think that with that web page and with uploading the resources and an email afterwards, I wonder if we could just close in a word of prayer as we then go about our day. Let us pray. Holy and loving God, you have created, sustained, redeemed the whole world, and your Holy Spirit continues to infuse us with energy, enthusiasm, imagination, and love. Bless us all in our efforts, our questions, our development of our